Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 5, Episode 24. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. Regardless of what you think about Israel attacking Iran, I believe it's a good time for us to come to grips with the fact that as Americans, as Westerners, we need to give up this idea that we have, in some sense, the moral high ground. And given the protests in LA, in New York, spreading throughout the country based on these new ICE guidelines, these crackdowns for illegal immigration, more and more of these social media posts are circulating about how people are being approached to participate in these protests for money. I call bullshit. Thank you to all of my loyal listeners. If you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting.
Act 1. The Death of the Moral High Ground.
Israel strikes Iran. I'm not going to make any type of prediction. I'm not going to break down any of the news that I've heard. There's still so many questions, so many unknowns, that it's very difficult for me to do a piece on this, at the time I'm recording this less than 24-hour old news. And because I had not planned to do a piece on Israel or Iran or this nuclear peace deal, I haven't really written out any notes. But there was one thing that stood out to me that was so important that I did want to make a comment on, and I think it's important for me to memorialize this at this point. This podcast, in many ways, is a time capsule for myself, and this came across as I was watching some of the news clips and seeing some of the photographs, that this is the death of any type of moral high ground in the West. Now, there's no definitive news about what the U.S. knew or when it comes to this strike. In the coming hours, days, weeks, I'm sure we're going to get more and more information in that regard. There have been news leaks over the past 2 weeks about Israel striking Iran to destroy their nuclear aspirations, and it very likely was coming from members of the Trump administration or the Pentagon that were wary of such a strike and wanted to get out into the public that this was a possibility, not only so that the American public could form an opinion and express as much, but maybe also to warn Iran that the talks, these negotiations over a new nuclear deal, they were drawing out too long, that there was too many hardline positions within the Iranian regime, and that there needed to be some movement. I don't believe for a second that Israel, just absent any forewarning to the United States, conducted this attack. They may have pulled that kind of stunt on Biden, but I don't think they're going to pull that stunt on Trump. I think Trump knew about it, and I think he signed off on it. There's a plausible theory kicking around out there that the Iranians were being too stubborn, and that by eliminating some of the more stubborn elements in the Iranian regime, that they may be more open to a deal. And yes, how do you remove these stubborn elements? You're going to have to kill them. The idea being, we remove all of these stubborn elements, and that the people who remain see what kind of consequences there are to not negotiating, not being more willing to take a deal, and then they will come in and take a deal that these hardliners wouldn't. Governments and militaries have employed that type of thinking for thousands of years. It never works. Killing the hardliners never succeeds in bringing a country and a people closer to a deal. It never makes the other side just want to quit. Now, I'm not going to go off on a tangent on that. How do you kill all of these hardliners? How do you get rid of these people when you don't have an active war, when you don't have a hot war? You've got to kill them where they sleep. You've got to kill them in their homes. As protected as they may be in their professional capacities as either members of the military or bureaucrats in the government or officials in the government, there is security, there is wariness. That's probably the best word to use. There's a wariness, so people are on alert. But what about when they leave work? What about when they go home or they go out into public spaces in their personal lives? Can you have that same type of heightened security? No. Israel wanted to decapitate Hezbollah, and they used their pagers against them, killing, I think, like 400 of the highest level principals in that organization. And it was an extremely effective strategy. If you're looking at it from a purely strategic-based, outcome-based mindset, it was highly effective. The only issue was that you inevitably hurt people around these principles, namely women, namely children. And women and children were killed. In Gaza and the West Bank, there are principles within the Hamas organization that Israel wants to take out, and they're taking them out now with impunity, regardless of whether or not there's a woman or a child anywhere close to them. And here you see this strike against Iran that was highly effective. We're talking about the number 2 guy in the Ayatollah's government. They took him out. The chief negotiator that the Trump administration was dealing with in these Iranian nuclear talks, they took him out. Many of the high-ranking military officials that would be involved in coordinating a response to this type of attack took them out. They're dead. Where did they kill them? Where they slept, so that their spouses and their children and their neighbors were all victims as well. The Israelis were comfortable with killing all of them. So where does that leave us, dear listener? One of the reasons we call terrorists terrorists is because they're willing to take such violent action in public places with disregard to the consequences of who they hurt. They're not attacking military targets. They're not even attacking political targets. We demonize the terrorists because we feel like there isn't any depth to what they will do in order to kill who they want to kill. If they want to kill someone and that person is in a public place, they are fully comfortable with the consequences of killing a bunch of civilians, a bunch of unintended victims. When you see the United States sign off on an attack like this, where we had to have known, given who Israel was going to target and where they were and when they were there, the fact that women and children were definitely going to be killed. Are you going to be able to sit there in 23 days if there's some incident where women and children are killed anywhere around the world and it involves one of our allies? Are we supposed to have all of this outrage that took place, that people were so callous and so careless that in order to achieve or advance some political or social or religious goal that they were willing to kill innocent bystanders? Aren't we supposed to be pissing and moaning about the fact that the Russians are killing indiscriminately all these people in the non-militarized urban centers of Ukraine? I don't care where you lie on the spectrum of whether or not this was justified or not, that Israel has a right to defend itself, or that this was some kind of illegal attack. I want the point of this segment to be simple and clear. Once you start killing people outside of the scope or the orbit of the person that you're trying to kill, you are normalizing killing civilians in order to achieve an aim. The ends are justifying the means. And while you may just shake your head and say war is hell, when you're king of the hill, you're sitting on top of the heap, how can you expect to turn around and elicit from anyone any type of sympathy when that shit starts to blow back on you? I'm not thinking about what this is going to do in the next 2 to 3 months, in the next 12 to 24 months. I'm thinking that this type of normalization of violence against civilians, against women and children, in order to say, well, we at least took out the target that we wanted to take out, that type of talk is going to be ashes in our mouth if that is what we have allowed or we are inviting into our reality as Americans and as Westerners. Those people don't love their kids any less than you love yours. We've let the genie out of the bottle. Pandora's box has been opened. As I've said on this podcast for the 5 years that I've been doing it, you don't see presidential administrations walk back the exercise of power or authority. When something is normalized, the next administration, it doesn't matter whether or not it's in the same political party, it doesn't matter who the president is, they're going to exercise these same liberties that have been advanced by the last administration. Trump said it best himself in the tweet after the strike. These may have been Israeli strikes, but they were using American weapons, some of the most advanced weapons that have ever been created in the history of mankind. The U.S. bears a level of culpability when it comes to these strikes. And it's coincidental, if not ironic, that it's happening in Iran. Let's talk about very quickly, to end this segment, what happened in Iran. The U.S. led a coup in Iran and put in the Shah, who, over the course of the 40 years that he ruled the country, did so with an iron fist, so much so that it was well known around the world what a tyrant he was and the things that he would do to his own people. When the Iranian people overthrew the Shah, what was strange about the fact that they took all of these U.S. hostages was that there was a very tepid international response at first, because so many other countries, even allies such as the United Kingdom, were aware of what a draconian regime the U.S. had allowed to grow in Iran. It was only after that hostage crisis lasted for months and months did more and more countries start to come advocating to the Iranians that it was a bad idea to keep U.S. hostages, the world's foremost superpower, for that length of time. That the U.S. could then pressure other allies to alienate Iran. And as the French diplomats told the Iranians for a long time, it's going to be easier and easier after every day that you keep these hostages for the U.S. to pressure these countries into alienating Iran. It's going to be more palatable to all of the people of those nations. They're going to soon forget that draconian government that you overthrew, and they're just going to remember the crazy-ass government that you have now that's kept all these hostages. And that's exactly what happened. The point of me bringing up that story is you think that you have this narrative in your head justifying the reasons why you do something. The Iranians felt completely justified in not only overthrowing the Shah, but doing so in such a violent manner and keeping those American hostages because they felt like the Shah was just a Western or a U.S. surrogate anyway, and they were justified in their anger. They couldn't get at the Shah, so they're going to get at these U.S. diplomats. And it blew up in their face. Are you telling me that we have somehow better justification for smoking a bunch of women and children? Not even the ones related to the targets that were killed, but the neighbors of these targets, people who were just on the streets in the area at the time of the attack. Mark it down on your calendar, dear listener. This is the death of the moral high ground in the West, but particularly in the United States.
Act 2, don't be stupid. No one is paying you to protest except the government.
So there's these protests in LA because of ICE's crackdown on migrants. And now you're seeing all these videos circulate on social media about how people are claiming to have been approached by someone who wanted to pay them to join the protest. I've seen several of these videos for Phoenix specifically. Again, if I see a video on social media, it's gotten to the bottom of the fucking barrel. Every other swinging dick on planet Earth with a social media account has probably already seen such a video. On social media, I'm the last guy to know. And I have seen these videos. Let me make clear for you, dear listener, what fucking nonsense this is. And to the extent that it's real, to the extent it's authentic, it's not some liberal conspiracy. It's not George Soros. It's your federal government dollars at work. It is literally a law enforcement agent or one of their surrogates, one of their CIs, confidential informants, that is going out and trying to stir up the appearance of this radical presence in order for what? For the government to be able to escalate, increase, capture power. And I'm not doing a long piece on this. This is not going to be a long segment. Let me prove to you very quickly why that is the case. There has been a conspiracy theory in these conservative circles, and that is all it is, a conspiracy theory, as stupid as any other conspiracy theory that you've ever heard, that there is some nefarious liberal hive mind that is funding protests and funding anti-American or revolutionary sentiment vis-a-vis protests, and that people out there in these protests, they're just paid actors. Let's harken back to the segment that I did on Sean Combs' money counter just last week. Sean Combs, in order to bribe a hotel staff member, a manager of a hotel, walks in with a bag full of cash and a money counter and counts out $50,000. He counts out another $50,000 and he says, go give this to your coterie so that they won't open their mouths either. And what happened when the police came calling? These people immediately started giving up the fact that they'd been paid a few dollars to do what? To keep their mouths shut about the fact that Combs beat the shit out of that girl. To keep their mouths shut about the fact that there was a videotape of Combs beating the shit out of that girl, and to keep their mouths shut about the fact that he had come in, Combs, and bribed the hotel manager to get that videotape. If all of this paid protester nonsense was real, do you not think that there would be a group funded by a conservative PAC, the Republican Party itself, that would go out and give more money to some of these people who had been paid to protest in order for them to come forward with their story? I saw a bunch of these videos and these people were claiming, oh, this guy came up and offered me $200. This guy came up and offered me $500 to participate in these protests. And of course, the details were vague and the location, the time was vague. Do you understand how inflammatory and how convicting, dear listener, eyewitness testimony to these types of transactions or people who were involved with it themselves coming out and saying, I was paid to go protest? Let it sit on that brain for a little while and let that little wheel in the middle of your head start to spin. Do you understand the political, the social ramifications of people coming out and admitting as much? If it were real, that would have happened already, because the person who was willing to take $200 or $300 or $500 or even $1,000 to go and participate in a protest is going to take money to confess to as much. Not once have I ever heard of anyone coming out and confessing, here's the person, here was the location, here was the time, here is how much money was exchanged, these were the instructions that I was given. And we're not talking about an incident that involved 11 or 12 people over the course of the last 20 years. It's a fucking protest. It's got fucking thousands of people marching up and down the streets from all walks of life under all sorts of socioeconomic conditions. I haven't gotten really animated on this podcast in a long time. As the words are coming out of my mouth and the sounds are impinging on your eardrums, is it not dawning on you how fucking stupid this entire conspiracy theory is? That there is some liberal hive mind paying for people to go out and protest. And let me flip the coin here. Let's look from below instead of above. How fucking stupid are any of the people on the right, or the conservative movement, if you will? How fucking stupid are these people if this is true, that over the years that it's been happening, they can't find one person, not one person, who's willing to come forth and to say, this is what happened. This is how much money I was paid. This is where I was paid. These were the instructions I was given. Are you trying to tell me that there isn't one protest organizer that was given money in order to pay people to come to the protest that hasn't gotten disillusioned or sideways with the organization who was giving them the money? How many politicians have we heard give these private speeches to these $1 million donors? Are you telling me there isn't one person who's been involved with these protests that has been paid or gotten money that hasn't videotaped it? That hasn't recorded it? There are no secrets in Washington, D.C. It is extremely difficult to keep a conspiracy together because people who have that type of information do not keep quiet. Either A, to save their own ass when they are found criminally culpable in another matter, or B, just for the fucking money. How can you believe that there are people getting paid to go out and protest, and yet you can see in the case with Sean Combs, after he did bribe people and he gave them a significant amount of money, once the law came around and started sniffing, they immediately fessed up, to the extent that anyone is offering money to go out and protest, it's a government agent or a government surrogate. We know this because of all of the different cases that we've been exposed to, even over the course of the last few years. That whole conspiracy to kidnap and kill the governor of the state of Michigan, all the FBI. And why do they do things like this? Hell, it's to increase their own visibility so that we'll feel less safe and we'll be more open to conceding power to these governmental agencies. It's a solid plan. It's a solid plan that was put into effect by J. Edgar Hoover all the way back in the 1950s, and it's worked ever since. I'm not saying that there is anyone out there offering money to get involved in protests. Frankly, I don't believe any of these claims. When I see these videos and they have all these vague details about where the person was who was just getting solicited, how much money, who they were actually talking to, think about it. It's the 21st century. Anybody that comes up and starts doing something suspicious, what happens? We start videotaping them, or a third party starts videotaping them. And all we have then is the aftermath of the story of the person who's posting, oh, I was just solicited to go join one of the protests for money. I call bullshit, dear listener. I call bullshit. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.